Hello.
Hello? Hello. Hi.
Okay. Hi, we're Operator. Thank you for coming. Today we're going to talk
Hi.
about generative choreography, which is the backbone of our newest project called Human Unreadable that released on Art Blocks a few weeks ago. But first we'll give you a bit of a backstory on Operator. There, now you can see. So it's a very modern romance. We first met on Instagram. We actually met to work together originally, which, you know, meeting on Instagram is a bit ironic because if you know anything about our practice, we focus mostly on surveillance capitalism, so it's a bit ironic. But then we became wives, and then we continued working together. And but before that, we were individual humans with individual lives. So
Believe it or
let's
not.
give it some context.
Yeah, so before we started working together, I'm a choreographer and performance artist, so I was working mainly with the body as a medium. Here's some of my past work.
And I am an HCI technologist, human-computer interaction, as well as an immersive artist. And together we build, in our collaborative practice for the last 7 years, we bring together immersive environments, creative technology, and performance art. We think of immersion and experiential art, which is our core medium, as not only a physical state, right? Not only physical immersion, but also emotional immersion as well.
So it's really important to us that we have no allegiance to any one medium. So Dejha's combined background with mine leads to a lot of mediums available to our disposal, and our allegiance is only to the concept and whatever medium is the best suited to convey that concept or convey that message. That's what we go with. Our other allegiance is to our cat, Claude. She's really important.
So the human body is an essential aspect to our practice. So I've been thinking about it more as the interface between human and computer and human and technology and the audience as participant, whereas Ania is thinking of the body as the medium, right? As a performance artist and a choreographer. So in our work, you'll see that the human is the performer, the human is the environment, the human is interacting with the technology, they're the participant as well as the performer. We have also technology as a core aspect of our practice, but we notice that when technology and art come together, often we have the tech world eye-rolling the art world, and the art world eye-rolling the tech world for gimmicky uses of art and vice versa. And so they're both parties are left thinking, you know, is that all there is? We're not going to play audio here because we don't have time for it because we have 150 slides in 15 minutes. That's 10 slides a minute. But here is Peggy Lee singing, Is That All There Is?
So, in order to avoid falling into gimmicky uses of technology and art and the eye rolls from either the tech world or the art world, we established the operator rules for art and technology in 2019, which we've been speaking about now for the last 4 years. These are rules we follow ourselves. Right, so the first one is no tech demos. So we like to give the example of, it's like if you call someone on the phone at the early days of the telephone and you get so excited about the fact that you're having that you're on the phone that you forget to have a conversation. And a lot of digital art can be that way. It's like, look what the tech did, but there was no concept. How is it art? You're just demonstrating what technology can do, which is not art. The next one is don't rely on scale. The next one is ask when the tech is no longer novel, will the work still hold up? So this Namjoon Paik piece is not brilliant because it's using the latest model of a TV. It's brilliant because it has a concept and it has aged well, and just because the technology is no longer obsolete doesn't affect the quality of the work itself. And finally, I'm a choreographer and I love Yvonne Rainer, no to spectacle.
Okay, so in our practice and in the rules of operators, art and technology, there is always a conceptual use of the technology, and we're also using that technology technically as well, right? Because we think that tech doesn't age well, but concepts do. So now we're going to talk about the privacy collection and Human Unreadable, but I think we first should scroll back to 2019, where our practice began exploring themes of surveillance capitalism.
So our first, and we're just kind of giving context for how we've worked and looked at privacy over the years. It started really with On View in 2019, which we thought we were making a piece about the changing choreography of viewing art and selfie museums and co-opting of experiential art, and that led us into Shoshana Zuboff and surveillance capitalism. So we kind of accidentally ended up in data privacy as a subject because that was kind of the reason why all of this experiential marketing, installation art, co-optation was happening all the time.
The next, in 2020, we created a signal blocking trench coat called I'd Rather Be in a Dark Silence Then. So any device or RFID object that you would put inside the dark pocket couldn't be tracked, hacked, traced, or monitored. In 2020, Eleanor Breezy curated, there she is, Renaissance 2.0 2.0. It was a group show, many digital artists. Ours was a coat on display, and everyone said, "What's with this trench coat?" They thought we left it at Coat Check or something. So in 2020, we created an immersive installation that displayed the qualities and the concept of the coat itself, and that won the Lumen Prize in 2021. So from there, it laid the groundwork for the privacy collection. So the privacy collection is looking at privacy, and I would just say privacy, maybe surveillance capitalism, I still feel like is relevant, but instead of through a Web 2 context, through a Web 3 lens, looking specifically at the tension between privacy and transparency inherent in blockchain technology.
So we also thought about this as kind of site-specific to crypto culture. So we knew that we wanted to try to make it as true to our medium and the way that we've been working for many years, but also be responding to the site that we were creating for, and really look at crypto art as a scene and a culture and figure out where our work can fit in, where it can add. And so the criteria for the privacy collection is there's a certain materiality. Number one, like Dejha said, looking at privacy and transparency and that tension. Also, it's crypto art site specific, so each lot is kind of responding or reflecting on a certain phenomenon within crypto art. The next one is bringing in the human body, which we felt was really missing from a lot of the Web3 and crypto art conversations. And again, the materiality is glass, transparent materials, and kind of X-ray.
So there's 4 lots in the privacy collection. The most recent lot was released a couple weeks ago called Human Unreadable on Art Blocks. And the site that we were creating for is on-chain long-form generative art. But we thought, as Ania just said, that the human body was missing, and also there's a lack of embodiment in digital art in general, and especially in long-form generative art. So this was our main challenge, and we wanted to move away from modernism, which is masculine-coded, and leaning always towards mathematical tendencies, precision, right? And we think that there's really only so much that you can express while adhering to a Swiss grid. So we wanted to move forward towards physicality, towards sensuality, towards chaos itself. And so this created Human Unreadable. And so let's dive into the work we're here to talk about. So Human Unreadable, the core concept of this is the human body hiding in plain sight on chain.
So what happens is, basically, and you'll hear through the process in a bit, but there's the human body, then that becomes obfuscated through a series of processes, and then the collectors actually kind of reveal the human through 3 steps in the 3 acts of the work. So yeah, the conceptual arc is the slow recovery of the human. So the moment of minting, the reveal on art blocks, the human that has been obfuscated, turned into code, and put into the generative model is then kind of put into this image that hints that a human is there, but you don't really see the human. Then the second step is you get to actually uncover the choreography that created the artwork, because the visual art is actually, all the shaders were driven by the motion data of an underlying movement sequence. And then finally, the human becomes fully visible in the performance of the first 100 pieces, where the collector gets to see the human movement that created their artwork. So again, slow recovery, starting with the human, a lot of obfuscation, then the collector kind of recovers.
So in Act 1, Art Blocks artworks, usually it starts and ends on Art Blocks. So as Ania just described, this is where the journey begins. So you mint on Art Blocks, then what's next? So the human is not visible, as Ania already said, but they go to the operator website. We are releasing a secondary token later this month, late June, and the collector connects their wallet to our site. They have the option to reveal their choreography. They could also not. If they choose to keep it in the plastic and keep it shiny, they can. It won't reveal to them and therefore to no one else. But say they reveal the choreography, they receive a secondary NFT. This is token bound to the primary token minted on Art Blocks using the owner of function. It is important that this token is not transferred or sold separately, because it is the underlying choreographic sequence that created this particular mint itself. So in this instance, we see that the human becomes a bit more visible because you can see the human body sketched out in stick figures. Now, Act 3, as Ania has already described, is the final performance, right? The flagship performance. And the first 100 mints that minted out, so that was like mint 2
through 101.
to 101, those will be performed at the IRL performance. And these particular choreographic sequences will make up one unique performance. The collector also has the opportunity to display generative art through the physical body. So they can display their choreography in addition to the final output. This is where the human becomes fully visible.
So this was something actually on the day of the mint that kind of hit us, that by the end of the day, hundreds of people were going to collect choreography, and we haven't done all of the research on whether that has actually happened before, but it feels like a significant moment, especially as a dancer and choreographer, to actually see choreography as an art object and something that people can own and display at their own will, because usually performance is collected in terms of artifacts, but in terms of actually owning a movement sequence, owning the motion data that's stored on chain, that feels significant and exciting for us.
Right. So this is important why the choreography is the driving force behind every part of the artwork. So we have what's called a choreographic hash. The choreographic hash is driven from the token randomness into our generative choreography algorithm and then spits out a unique choreographic sequence that no one else has except for one person. So the choreographic features, you'll see they'll come up in the literal feature list on Artblock's website. So usually these traits are something that is completely visual. I got the black one, I got the purple one, I got the one that's round, I got this orange triangle, or I got this or this or this. But here you won't see any visual features. You will only see choreographic traits and choreographic rarity. But in addition to that, in tech we find that vulnerabilities are something to fix. They're problems that need to be fixed. But in life and in art, we think they should be a feature. So we literally made vulnerability a feature on our Artblocks project. Now, we wanted to game the system in the algorithm, and we had to do everything in our power to restrain and have discipline because we wanted to make vulnerability rare, right? We wanted to make it uncommon,
Because
right?
we wanted to make it valuable.
But we didn't, and to our delight, it actually turns out that vulnerability is uncommon, it is rare, and there's only 13 pieces that have vulnerability. There are some vulnerable collectors in this room, I know. Consensual on-chain art nipple.
This was not intended, but the conversation that has circulated now around these works, and even how the market has decided that works that have a nipple are more expensive than works that have feet in them, even though there's also a lot of foot fetish people that are like, no, the feet are great. So as a gender scholar, there's so many essays I could write about how this is all playing out, but the most important thing is it's consensual on-chain art nipple, which is a victory.
Okay, so now you have an overview of what the experience of the art is. So now we're going to tell you how we made it. So in order to, we're going to take a couple more. Yeah. So in order to create this, we created a on-chain generative choreography method, and it took us 9 months to make this artwork itself. The first 5 months we spent just making the method itself. As much as this was an engineering feat, this was also an artwork, right? So do you want to bring us through the movement library?
So the first step was creating movements. So there's 32 individual movements that were designed that then basically will be put into different sequences and different orders with different tempos and facings determined. But this is a lot of iterating the movement library, because normally in a generative artwork you tune the outputs, you tune the visual artwork outputs, but as these are also going to be sequences that are performed live, we had actual choreographic tuning sessions where we ran the model, we had to have dancers perform what the model spit out and be like, that looks like shit, there's too many movements that are like this, and kind of like iterate until the sequences themselves could stand alone as performance artworks that we would be proud of. So these are some of our early failed tests at Glitch residency, where we were first figuring out what kind of movements look good when put into any kind of order, which took some iteration.
So early on, we found out that we had the double challenge that not only the visual output needed to look good, but the choreographic sequences needed to look good. And so the previous slide showed you all of the shitty choreographic sequences that our algorithm created. So Ania revised the movement library over, I think five or so movement library design sessions. And then once we were happy with it, we went into motion capture. So now we can take the physical and we can make it digital. So we put Ania in a motion capture suit, and we captured the entire library and digitized it. Now, our next goal was to convert this animation file into a usable format, which is called a JSON, right? And this I'm going to show you because 3 seconds of movement in a CSV file looks like this. It's about 1,000 lines down and about 800 to the right. And what we know about blockchain, many lovely things, but it's not really meant for high volumes of storage. So it would have taken us about 200K to upload this on-chain. So we're artists, we don't have this kind of dough. So we had a bone budget that we assigned for ourselves and an entire process in which we would do data processing in order to preserve the underlying choreography in a way that was abbreviated but still holding the essence of the motion data itself. Next slide. Next slide, please. There, thank you. Okay, so in this process, we had to take this data, and it's a bunch of meaningless numbers until we provide meaning to it, right? So we captured ways to think about how a performer is twisting and rotating. What is their average orientation? How far did their heart travel in one move? So we assigned all of this value to each of the individual moves. We built a series of tools that didn't exist, which we realized after we already embarked onto the project. So we had to invent a bunch of stuff and a process for choreographing in spreadsheets, which Ania had to do. Lucky you. This is you bone pruning.
That was not on my bucket list to choreograph in a spreadsheet, but I'm grateful for the challenge. So yeah, this is bone pruning, where basically in order to save on motion data storage, I had to do each move and then decide which bones were actually critical to the expression of that movement. So which bones can I leave out and the movement can still be expressed. That was fun.
So where did the budget land? It was $323 per bone, per move, 30 bones per move, which is $96.90 per move. Okay, that's how much we paid. And there's 30 moves in the library and one improv sequence. So here's the final data that you can see. On the left, it's partially human readable, and on the right, we added hashes per bone so that you cannot see the data and you cannot parse the data whatsoever. So at this point, it was 5 months later, and the motion data was complete. And the entire engineering team was like, well, what is this going to look like? Because we haven't seen any visuals. And I was like, don't worry, we'll get to that.
That's the easy part.
What will it look like?
So we decided, again, returning to the primary materiality of the privacy collection, which is glass, X-ray, and the human body. So again, that kind of answered the questions of what these were going to look like in order to stay consistent with the collection. But what we underestimated is the feat of even making those materials with code. For example, making realistic glass with code could be an artwork in itself, and that was just the material that we could then use in order to make the full artworks. And also, everyone kind of assumed, because it's choreography and movement, that we were going to have moving images. And we were like, no, of course, these are still.
So, Ania already said this, but glass, transparency, X-ray, and the body are the core materiality of the privacy collection. We made glass with math. This would take probably 4 hours. Anyone in animation would probably know. Rendering this in a 3D program would take, several hours to render, but this is all happening real time. Here is, some swatches from our final glass. Here's our shitty original glass. I always like to show really bad work, because good work comes from bad work, and here's some bad work. Okay, so next was the body part. So as we know, in art blocks and in long-form generative art, there's no rasterized images, but these images and the final output look very, very organic. So we had to capture the human body and then programmatically draw these body parts onto our P5.js canvas. And now, moving forward, the generative model. So there's two aspects of the generative model and two aspects that they drive. One is the choreographic sequence, which is the underlying length sequence of pauses, tempo, and the performer orientation, as well as the underlying motion data. So this became a process of fine-tuning the choreography and the algorithms so that the final outputs of the performances look right. Ania already spoke to this a bit earlier. And then we have, of course, the visual output tuning. Go ahead.
We're doing time.
Yep. Want me to keep going?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So the choreography itself, it would drive these particular parameters. So multiple glass shaders, the body part, the motion path, which was tied to a signature bone. Here are the glass objects. So on the right here, you can see there are 3 outputs. They're all deriving from this one particular glass object. So obviously, they look nothing like each other. Early testnet, we had beautiful imagery that we loved, but there was no way to get back to it. This is kind of the unrequited love of generative art. And once you've lost your lover, how do you get them back? You can completely overanalyze it, which is what we did. And we created an analytical model in order to define our taste and find our way back. So as we said, this was all processes made with math. And here you can see the 6 distinct looks of the work itself.
And what many people don't know is that each look is actually tied to a different emotional climate, and the emotional climate is something that will drive the performance. And so basically, in order to add more texture to the live performance, when I'm looking at a score and if it says emotional climate, your crush just responded, then that means that that movement sequence is going to be performed with the feeling that your crush just responded, which is very different than performing that same movement sequence with a different emotional climate. So each look is tied to a different emotional climate.
And lastly, this artwork is fully resolution agnostic, so you can see them printed at full scale, which will be providing token-gated printing. And we really think that these artworks are really meant to be printed and be physical and not on the screen. Again, bringing generative art into the body, into the physical world itself.
All of our friends were like, it took all of this, guys, for you guys to make something on canvas. You're completely insane.
The process of making flat art if you're operator. Okay, historical roots, and this is how we're closing this, because we want to say that first, there are no first. I think this is really important to tie back to history, build upon it, instead of thinking of how could this be novel, how could this be a first itself. So, a few references. Go ahead.
Yeah, the first is Merce Cunningham and Chance Dance. The next is computational choreography has a very rich history, starting with Gene Beeman in the 60s and Analivia Cordeiro as well. And finally, obviously, experiments in art and technology movement was extremely influential because of the deep level of collaboration between us and our engineers, and that being a very involved, intimate kind of process that took place over several months. And this is our last slide.
And the last 5%. So,
5%.
The last 5% is the last, in this case, for this project, the last 4 weeks where everyone goes cuckoo and everyone loses their shit because they're like, it all works, it all looks amazing, and Ania and Dejha, why are we still working on this? And we're saying, this is the last 5% where it goes from a tech demo to art, right, to operator-filtered art, and that last 5% is very significant, right? And one of the engineers, Isaac Patka, who is part of our team, he made an observation, which is in engineering, when it works, the job is over. But in art, when it works, the job just begins. And I think this is the difference between art and tech demos. And as we know, tech doesn't age well, but concepts do.
Thank you.
Questions? We have a few minutes for questions. We are a little bit over time, so.
Are you taking a question? Oh, okay.
Guys, any questions? No, just claps. Okay, that's good too.